Hey, Champion Nation. Welcome to the ChampionNation podcast.
People, but it's a very hard habit to break for sure.
And then what doesn't, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. And what happens is, while we are traveling down the road of perfectionism, we end up dealing with another catastrophe of burnout.
Yes.
Address that situation if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Especially with your clients.
Yes. So burnout is very common among high performing leaders. It gets to the point where you're exhausted all the time. You're overwhelmed. Even if you say you have boundaries, you're not enforcing them. You're not respecting those boundaries on your time or on your energy or on your focus. Burnout's exhausting. Burnout, it has a real impact on organizations. It has a real impact on revenue and the bottom line.
Hey, Champion Nation. Welcome to the ChampionNation podcast. I am so excited today for this conversation, just like I am excited about all of our conversations, but I'm really excited about this particular conversation. The reason we have Dr. Parker joining us. We have Dr. Parker joining us today. She is a social psychologist, executive coach, and founder of I believe it's Level 42 Consulting. But most importantly, of all those great accolades, she's also a breast cancer survivor. Okay. And this is the ChampionNation podcast and the ChampionNation platform. But that in itself is worth celebrating. Dr. Parker, welcome to the ChampionNation podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'm doing great.
Absolutely. So thank you so much. Real quick, briefly, tell us who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Absolutely. Like you said, I am a social psychologist by training. I'm an executive coach by day, by night, whatever my clients need me. And what I do is I help high-performing leaders really identify their blind spots and uncover what's missing from their lives so that they can create a life and career that's truly aligned with their dreams.
Thank you for sharing that. Tongue twister right now. You said high performing leaders. Do you work with leaders who are already high performing, or if you have a leader that has the potential to be a high performing leader and you work with them?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So
okay.
high potential leaders, high performing leaders, if they're in a place that they're in a leadership role, which may or may not have a title with it, but you can be a leader without being a manager or some official level of title in your career. But if you view yourself as a leader and you find yourself struggling with burnout, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, just overwhelmed and stressed and feeling like, hey, there's something missing, then that's where I get to come in and help.
I'm always curious about the title or the phrase or the category high performing. What does that really mean? If I hear high performing, that must mean there must be a low performing. So literally, what does high performing mean? What does it look like?
In my mind, when I think of high performing, and maybe this is because I am the former gifted kid, but I think of the former gifted kid, the kid who got out there and you did these things, you jumped through these hoops because you just knew how to do things. So you went to school, you got the degree, you got the career, you got the job, you got the promotions, you started the family, you did all these things you were supposed to do, in part because you were supposed to do them, in part because, hopefully you enjoyed them along the way. And in part because it's just who you are. You're used to going out there and knowing how to solve the problems, seeing solutions, knowing how to work with people, create the relationships. And nobody's perfect. It doesn't mean that all of these things are easy. But for the most part, high performers, they're going to know how to get things done. They're used to delivering. They're used to being the person who is called on, who is counted on to hit the mark, to make the achievements happen. Eventually in your career, that often means that you start leading a team of people, and then you're responsible for those people being high performing as well. So when I talk about the high performing leaders, it's those people who they've kind of spent their lives either learning and studying to know how to do the things to be successful, or, in the case of some gifted kids, not all gifted kids, some things just come easily to them. And then they get to a stage of their career where they're like, yeah, okay, this is what I signed up for, but there's a gap. There's something that's missing. I did all of these things and on paper I'm very successful. Yeah, I'm making a lot of money, or I'm making a lot of money for my boss or for the shareholders or for whoever. And still there's some emotional need that's not being met.
I like that. So Ken, you mentioned earlier about being on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you connect the two, high performing? Because when I think about high performing, I think about high performers who are always just goal oriented. They are fulfilled. They're not on autopilot. They have their to-do list. They just ready to take life by its horns. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, and it's funny that you mention that, because a lot of times being that person who is always goal oriented, who knows your process, you have your list, you have your goals, that can be autopilot. That for a lot of high performers, that is what autopilot looks like, because you know what you need to do to be successful. So you just go in and do it. And in the case of a lot of my clients, because they are so high performing, because they have the tools, because they have the resources, because they know what works for them, they don't even take that step back to go, well, yes, this is successful, but whose version of success is that? That was my version of success, 15, 20 years ago when I started my career. That was my version of success when I got into this role, to this, this promotion that I got. That was my version of success. And that autopilot comes from just doing the things you need to do, and then going, when was the last time you asked what success actually looks like for you? And this isn't all high performers. I mean, a lot of leaders out there, they create a vision and they revisit it, and they are aligned with they're very aligned with the goals that they've set. But for a lot of people, it's the process of setting the goal and achieving it, and setting the next goal and achieving it, and setting the next goal and achieving it. And you're going down a great path. And the question is this actually your path? Is this the path you wanted to be on? Or is the autopilot comes from this being you going down the path that you believe you were supposed to be on? From whatever source it came from, whether it was, your upbringing, your education, society, your family, your spouse, whatever, this is what we need from you. And you go, I can do that. I can do most things. I'm a high performer. That's great. That autopilot gap is, but did you ask if that's actually what you want, or what you still want?
I like that. Do you find there's a theory, and it's probably, it's not a theory, 10,000 hours, that's when, you have hit your stride.
Become an expert, right?
Yes, right. At 10,000 hours. So high performers, do you find that it's later on in life where people look back and say, wow, I did everything I was supposed to do. I'm 50 years old. I'm 60 years old, or I'm in my late 40s. And now maybe this is not the life that I was meant to live. Do you come across that often, or have you come across that?
Yes. And I mean, there's an artifact of, I'm in my mid 40s, good Gen Xer here. And, part of it's a generational thing of thinking, well, I think the space of being able to ask that question, of recognizing that gap, often comes with, you've already jumped through a lot of the hoops. I think, either early in your career, when you have a fairly clear career path ahead of you, but you don't know exactly how it's going to go, you may not ask yourself that question as much, because there are still options. And yet, whether you call it a midlife crisis, whether you call it, just being in your 40s, and I mean, I have clients in their 30s, I have clients in their 60s, so it's not just a specific age. But I think people often reach a level of success when they just sit back and go, everything on paper looks really good. When I catch up with old high school friends, or I see an old colleague and they go, how are you doing? You go, oh, I'm great. I got this job. I'm at this firm. I'm at da-da-da-da-da. It's great. And inside you're going, and I'm really disconnected. I'm doing the work, but I'm not fulfilled. I'm jumping through these hoops, but it's just because that's my habit, to jump through the hoops. I'm not really motivated to go after that next level, or to even ask the questions of, why am I still doing this if I'm unhappy?
You mentioned the word fulfilled, and I don't know about you. Have you ever had a taste for something to eat, and it doesn't matter what you ate? If you did not get that specific thing, you're still searching for it. You ever had a sweet tooth? You like, what is it?
That's the one.
What is it?
If my body wants ice cream, I might as well just eat the ice cream, because I don't care how many apples or carrot sticks I'm going to put in there. I still want the ice cream.
Yeah, I had a sweet tooth yesterday, and my wife, she got a Chick-fil-A milkshake. But if we would have eaten like a cheesecake or a slice of cake or anything other than what I wanted, I would have kept searching. I would not have been fulfilled. So you have a program, a life-aligned leadership system. And I know it deals with being fulfilled.
Yes.
Because I said, I feel fulfilled. How do you navigate or help individuals to gain that feeling of being fulfilled with your program?
Well, I mean, the program, there are 4 stages in the program, and we always start with the first stage, which is the alignment system. This is where people are kind of doing the work on actually digging in on what their vision is. They're creating that clarity of what they actually want. So the first step is always the alignment. The second, third, fourth steps, they kind of all work together. Sometimes, depending on what situation they're in, they might show up in different places. The final step, the fourth step, kind of is always fourth, because it's the piece we're going to always come back to, even after we stop, even after the program is run through. My clients, they're going to keep coming back to the fourth step. But the second step is around balance and boundaries. The third step is around confidence, communication. And then that final step, this is the transformation system. So that's about where the habits come in. And these are all the unconscious things that we've picked up along our lives that make us kind of who we are and how we show up in the world. And I always like to say that I don't think there's any such thing as a bad habit. Every habit you've picked up unconsciously, consciously, on purpose or not, at some point served some emotional or psychological need. Now, the question is whether or not that habit gets you where you want to go, whether or not that habit is healthy for you, good for you. Because I can say there are some unhealthy habits, but I won't necessarily call it a bad habit, because even the unhealthy habits often meet a psychological need in the moment that they're formed. But our habits are usually unconscious. And that's why this being the final step, this is the lifelong process. Once you have a understanding of how to stay aligned, how to revisit your vision, how to know what your core values are, those all happen in the first stage of the Life Aligned Leader program. You can come back and revisit those over time. The balance, the confidence pieces, there are tools throughout that you're going to learn, and you're going to keep coming back and using them. But those habits, the habitual pieces, those are the ones that are going to make or break you over time. And it's about recognizing when your habits are preventing you from becoming who you want to become, from getting where you say you want to go.
And thank you for sharing that. And going back to habit, high performers have a habit of putting their career, their profession over everything.
Very often. I won't say everybody, but very often. It's very common.
It is more. How about this? More often than not. Most high performers do it. So work-life balance. I posted something on my social media a few days ago with me and my son. I was typing up something on the computer. He had his Nintendo Switch in front of me. He was saying, "Look." I was like, having look. I was trying to do everything. So my question is, does work-life balance exist? Is it for real, or is it an illusion that the market put out there for us to buy books and audio programs and different things?
I love the question. And the funny thing is, I actually recorded a video about this. I had it out on YouTube a week or two ago. And I think the challenge is when people think of balance, if you think of like scales of justice, scales of whatever, people think of balance as having to be kind of always in this constant homeostasis. And so the challenge I like to give my clients is don't think of balance as a scale where it has to stay perfectly level all the time. But if you think of it as a seesaw, and I can never quite do this with one arm, maybe one arm is better. A seesaw is not fun when it's perfectly balanced. A seesaw has the ebb and flow. The seesaw has the give and take. So if you have work on one end and whatever it is on the other end, whether it's family, whether it's hobbies, whether it's travel, whatever the thing is that work is taking you away from, it's not always about keeping them perfectly lined up with each other, but it's about knowing that in your life, in the situation that you've created with that work, with that career, that there's the give and take. So yeah, there may be new leadership coming in. You may have a product launch. You might have a rollout of some kind, and work is going to be heavy for a while.
Yes.
Maybe work is pulling your seesaw down and you're not getting that time with family. But it's about knowing that, in my mind, and the way I work with my clients, is what balance means is knowing that, yes, this, for this season, for this moment, for this week or month or whatever it is, this might take more. And the trade-off is when you have time for that other, the family, the hobbies, the travel, whatever it is, that time is for that you're going to be able to say, nope, I'm taking time off. I'm not answering the emails. I'm not, whatever your caveats are for emergencies. But that it's very, very rare that the work would then come into those things that you need. That kind of thing to me is balance. In some cases, it simply means flexibility. So balance isn't about always being static, always saying, well, this gets 50% of my time, this gets 50% of my time. It's saying, oh, if this gets 70 right now and this drops down, eventually this 70, it's going to go down to 20 so that these other things can get their due as well.
That is such a difficult excuse me. That's such a difficult task. It really is. I wouldn't necessarily consider, it's so crazy. I wouldn't consider myself a high performer, but those around me would consider me a high performer. Perfectionism.
A lot of high performers like to push it off. They're like, no. I'm good. No.
It ain't me. No.
We see you. No. I see your greatness.
No, yeah, that's good. No, not me. But perfectionism. It's real.
It's real.
Now that's real. And the other part,
as my 15-year-old would say, real.
Yes. And high performers tend to be unforgiving to themselves.
Especially to themselves.
Yeah, they could forgive a partner, they could forgive the job, they could forgive everyone. But you're telling me I have to ignore an email. And I'm not saying me, I'm just telling all of our listeners and viewers. You're telling us we have to ignore email because we have to spend time with whoever, and the seesaw of all of this. We start to feel guilty on both sides.
Oh yeah.
And explain that. Sorry.
No. This is a challenging statement, but feeling guilty is kind of a choice. We make ourselves feel guilty. Nobody else is making us feel that. We choose to feel guilty about something. And that's a hard habit to break. We often feel guilty about things. Like, okay, but feel the feeling, and then you don't have to base your behavior on it and decide if that feeling actually helps you to what you want to achieve. If feeling guilty is going to change your behavior in the next situation, then maybe it's serving a purpose. If you're just feeling it because you're supposed to, it's not serving a purpose for you. But that's a side of the conversation from perfectionism. The thing with perfectionism is that, and this kind of ties into, I often think of, perfectionism and imposter syndrome, they are different, and they fit very well together, because a lot of time that happens with, when somebody's experiencing this need for perfectionism, it's because, oh my gosh, if I'm not showing up perfect all the time, people are going to find me out. And that's where the imposter syndrome comes in. People are going to realize that I didn't actually, I have this belief that I shouldn't be here, where everyone around you is like, you absolutely should, right? I think I've already gone aside from the actual question you asked about perfectionism. But the biggest thing that when I'm working with clients who struggle with perfectionism, and I like to think of myself as a recovering perfectionist. I spent a lot of time in this space of believing that I had to be everything to everyone all the time. And if I dropped the ball or let anybody down, and I gave myself a stomach ulcer by the time I was 24.
Oh, wow.
So it's not a good place to be, right? But I remind people that, especially when they're in that leadership role, if you're showing up all the time trying to be perfect, what is the message that then you are sending to your team or to your kids or to your partner or to the people around you about what your expectations are for them? Because they'll say, oh, no, I don't need anybody else to do that. That's just what I need to do. And I go, okay, but if your bar is so high, then what happens when somebody on your team makes a mistake? If it's a mistake you know about, you can come in and help them fix it. But if they're afraid to tell you about that mistake because they don't want you to think that they're not perfect, because they see you striving for perfection all the time, then that mistake grows and the trust falls. And then before you know it, it's a much bigger issue because they didn't feel safe to come to you. So your perfectionism, while you may think you're just holding yourself to a high standard, it's creating an environment around you that can very quickly become toxic. And this is when you have these unrealistic expectations for yourself, for your team, for your family. I mean, and most perfectionists, they typically only hold it for themselves. Some do hold it for the people around them as well. They think, well, if I'm trying this hard, why isn't everybody?
That is true.
Well, you're trying this hard because this is your dream, your goal. Yes, they want to support it. They want the job. They want the paycheck, but they may not have the emotional buy-in to it that you do. So it's not their dream or goal. Why should they put in as much, right?
Yes.
But it's asking that question of, you think you're setting this great example by holding yourself to this really high standard, but in reality, you're creating an environment where it's not safe for people to fail. And we have to, I mean, I would love to think that we could live in a world where it's safe for people to make mistakes, because mistakes are how we learn. If you never make a mistake, then how do you know that you're doing the best you can do? Because you haven't found the points of failure. You haven't found the opportunities for growth. If you're never making a mistake, chances are you're playing it really safe.
Absolutely.
You're staying in a very narrow lane just to be successful when there's so many other opportunities to have a bigger impact, to reach more people, to make a difference, to live your life the way you want to. But there's risk of making mistakes. There's risk of failure there. But that's how we grow. Your question of what, can I be better? That's how we find out.
Absolutely.
So you have to, getting rid of perfectionism, that just opens the door to so much other greatness for yourself, for your team, for your family, for all these people. But it's a very hard habit to break, for sure.
And then what doesn't, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. And what happens is, while we are traveling down the road of perfectionism, we end up dealing with another catastrophe of burnout.
Yes.
Address that situation if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Especially with your clients.
Yes. So burnout is very common among high performing leaders. It gets to the point where you're exhausted all the time. You're overwhelmed. Even if you say you have boundaries, you're not enforcing them. You're not respecting those boundaries on your time or on your energy or on your focus. Burnout's exhausting. Burnout, it has a real impact on organizations. It has a real impact on revenue and the bottom line. So when I'm working with clients who are in that burnout space, a lot of it is recognizing that recovering from burnout takes time. It's not just simply going, oh, okay, well, I'm going to quit that committee or do that. Now all of a sudden I can be back at 100%. No, you've borrowed from tomorrow already. You've pushed yourself beyond what you should have, what you actually were capable of, again, because, your bar was very high. Now that you're burned out, you have to give yourself some space. And this is the time to really kind of revisit what your goals actually are. A lot of times we get burned out because we are jumping through those hoops that society or other people, or that we believe other people expect or need from us. We're jumping through these hoops and using all of our energy and showing up here and showing up there and volunteering for this and, being on that committee and writing this paper and all these presentations, whatever it is. And you have nothing left to give to the things that actually matter the most to you. I think a lot of us who end up in that burnout space, we just lose sight of why we started the work or the project or the relationship or the engagement, whatever it is, why we started it in the first place. But in order to heal that burnout, you kind of have to it's not just standing still and letting things pass you, but it's taking a few steps back and going, whoa, I got myself into this situation. I slid down the slide and all of a sudden I'm surrounded by all of this and I'm just so tired. I don't even know, like I know people who are amazing at their jobs, but when you have a one-on-one conversation with them, they recognize on all they're missing out on. They're so burned out that even if they're physically at their kid's event or at a family dinner, mentally and emotionally, they're not there. They're not showing up the way they want to in all areas of their life because they put so much into this one bucket. So whether it's perfectionism or imposter syndrome or, whatever it is that leads people to burnout, it's a real thing. And I know it's kind of a buzzword. People go, oh, I'm so burned out and I'll just go get some caffeine, have a coffee and I'll be fine for this afternoon. That's a tiny little Band-Aid. You can do it for a while. You might be able to manage your burnout long enough to deliver a product or launch something. But in the long term, you are, like I said, you're borrowing from tomorrow and you're paying beyond, what that investment is actually worth most of the time.
Once again, thank you for sharing it. I think while you were speaking, I just had a vision. I think there's several stages. There's, I'm tired. Mm-hmm. Then I am exhausted. And then the next stage is I'm just burnt out. And it is almost
there's usually some disillusionment in there somewhere too.
Yeah.
Like, I'm tired. I don't know why I'm doing this, but it's what I always do.
Yes.
Now I'm exhausted, and now I'm burnt. I'm charred earth, right? Scorched earth.
And I like that. And by the time you get there, though, my grandmother used to always say, "Hey, Kayshawn, when you know better, you do better." The thing is, the gap between knowing and doing, sometimes that can be years.
Yes.
But also within that gap, there can be a lot of people that you have hurt along the way. So during that burnout stage, you can really turn your family and friends off. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, I know there's an organization that I won't talk about. I experienced that burnout. My wife did not like who I was when I was with that organization, and nor did I, nor did my kids. And they were happy when I walked away from that organization. Yeah. But because I was burnt out, I was chasing the numbers. I don't know if some of your clients have done that as well. They're chasing a target that they're never hit. It's just once you hit it, you just move it back and move it back and move it back.
Yeah.
But have you had a client that came to you and said, "Hey, I'm so burnt out. I totally dislike the organization and the functionality as well. I don't even want to touch that anymore." Have you had clients come to you and say that?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I've had clients that have spent 25 years in an organization and, have high titles and ranks and stuff, and just like, I don't know why I do this anymore. And then go, okay, then why do you do it? And is this still the right thing for you to do? And I think that's one of the challenges for so many of my clients and so many high performing leaders, is that by the time they get to the point of saying, oh, okay, I'm finally ready to admit to myself that there's a big gap. I don't know if I can fix it and stay here in this, whether it's the industry or the actual company or the role or whatever, or if I need something different. But a lot of times it's scary to even ask that question, because so many people are counting on them. If they're leading a team, they think, well, I've brought these people into this organization. I've led them this far. We have a shared common goal. I can't walk away and leave them hanging.
Right.
Or I've risen to this level of success. Everybody in my family is relying on this income. I can't go do something that I'm really passionate about because there's too much uncertainty for the people who are counting on me.
Yes.
And so I mean, one of the things I remind my clients of is, yes, people are counting on you. You're a high performing leader. You put yourself in a position where people rely on you and your expertise and your insights and your contributions. And ultimately, they are not living your life. You are. And we're going to sit down and talk about what you actually want. And I mean, there are times, it sometimes takes months with my clients for them to be able to actually ask themselves those questions and be honest about what they actually want, without there being that, that feeling of guilt.
Which is a choice.
Which is a choice. It's a hard choice to not make. I'm not saying it's an easy choice to avoid, but it is ultimately a choice. Which
takes me to the next point. Our next point, COVID really was a hard reset on the world in its totality. So many people lost their lives. It's ridiculous. But with human beings, sometimes it takes tragedy to strike for us to say, you know what, maybe I should pivot. Maybe this is not what it was meant to be. You were diagnosed with breast cancer. Your mother, entrepreneur, the list goes on and on, highly decorated. When that diagnosis came about, did it stop you in your tracks?
Oh, this is going to sound crazy, but nope. So this is a moment that I look back on. So I was 35. My kids were 2 and 4. I was the sole income for our family. My then husband, now ex, but we co-parent well. We're still very good friends. My then husband was a stay-at-home dad. He was a writer, so he was staying home with the kids while I was working. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So this was 13 years ago. 13 years cancer-free. So that's, I'll celebrate that. Thank you. Yes. But here's the crazy thing. It's been 13 years and I'm still healing and recovering from it. I have a surgery in 4 weeks, which is my 9th surgery,
Oh, wow.
recovering from the physical trauma of breast cancer. So even 13 years of being healthy, it's still a very common part of my life, which is insane. But to answer the question of whether or not it stopped me, it didn't. Which is, in hindsight, I look back and go, that was insane. But at the time, I was, like I said, I was a sole breadwinner. I was considering a run for elected office at the time. And I thought, when they told me I had cancer, I went, okay, let's get it out of me. I'm too busy. I have too much to do to be sidelined by cancer right now. And I had a bilateral mastectomy. I had a total hysterectomy. I had, chemo. I did all the things, lost all the hair through the treatment. Throughout that year, I think I took after my last chemo, because it was right before the holidays, I think I took 2, maybe 3 weeks off of work. Other than that, I worked through most of that. After a surgery, I might have had to be home for a week or 2 while I recovered, but I had my laptop at home and I would call into meetings. And in hindsight, I just go, what was going on with me at 35 that I could not take time to process and deal with cancer? And flip side of that is, while I was in treatment, is also when we got the divorce. So I put the divorce in on top of the treatment, and I kept working because it was the thing I knew I could do. I felt like I had failed my family by getting sick. I felt like I had failed my kids because I couldn't pick them up for, almost a year, and they were toddlers. And I had all these ways that I believed I was failing everybody, but work was a thing I could keep showing up for. Work was part of my identity that I could keep delivering on. And it was about a year or 2 after, the treatment, after I was out of chemo and my hair was growing back and the surgeries were getting farther apart, that I finally sat down and dealt with that experience. So no, it didn't slow me down at the time, and it should have.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Does that sort of go against what your training is now, as far
yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's one of those things that when I see my clients continuing to push through these things and not give themselves the time to manage. I mean, I have clients that, unfortunately have lost parents during COVID, or, lost family members, or, had these big experiences in their lives. And they think, well, all this stuff is happening at home. My kid is in crisis, but I'm going to go on this work trip. I just go, ooh, let's revisit what your values actually are. If this work performance is your core value over your kids, I'm not going to judge you. I just want you to be aware that that's the decision you're making, and that it's not this autopilot piece of, I can't handle this stress right here, so I'm going to go do the thing that I know I can deliver on. I can keep showing up at work and everybody there is going to smile and nod and tell me how brave and strong I am, as opposed to if I go home and I see my kid who's suffering and I can't fix it for them, then I feel like a failure as a parent. That's just putting your head in the sand. There are hard things that we have to do, unfortunately. Sometimes it involves work, sometimes it doesn't. But just staying in that autopilot stage, I always say that one of the things I do as an executive coach is I get to shine a spotlight on those blind spots for you. Mm-hmm. Yes, you're a high performer. Yes, you want to deliver. Yes, people are counting on you. But what do you really want out of your life? And is this it? I'm not going to judge you for making this decision. I'm going to support you and try to give you all the resources you need for whatever decision you're choosing to make. And at the same time, I'm going to be that voice in the back of your head, maybe louder than the voice in the back of your head, going, is this aligned with what you said you wanted?
Your battle with cancer and still dealing with it 13 years later, I'm sure you've had some influences on community and, the women community around you. I'm sure you probably talk with them, encourage them, and different things of that nature. I always like to say that influence is like the wind. You can't see the wind, but you can feel its impact, right? Yes. You can see its impact. And that's what influence is like, at least according to me, is subtle.
Yeah.
So how do you use your influence, and then how do you also use or coach and guide your clients to use their influence to build more meaningful connections? Because the whole premise of this conversation really is about fulfillment, It's about discovering and becoming aware and coming into yourself. So how do you manage that influence piece?
Yeah. Well, I love this question. And the fun thing is I actually did, I had a speaking gig talking about the art and science of influence just last week. So this is all top of mind for me because I do think of influence as both an art and a science. From the science side, a lot of people are going to be familiar with Bob Cialdini. He was actually one of my faculty members when I was in grad school. So I got to study under Bob for a long time, but he's the one who wrote, Influence, Persuasion, these books that are all over, all over business schools. Like everyone knows Bob. So there's the science behind influence and this idea of reciprocity and scarcity and liking and social proof. And all of these things matter, especially if you're in, sales or marketing roles, you're promoting something. Of course, there's a science to it if you put these things out there. The art of influence, however, and it's still based on psychology. The art of influence is being able to take a step back. And before you're crafting that strategic message that relies on, one of these principles, being aware of the underlying emotional, the core human needs that everybody has. I mean, everybody has a need for certainty. Everybody has a need for connection. Everybody has a need for significance. Everybody has a need to feel like they matter and that they are a unique and distinct person who is still connected to something bigger than themselves. These are just core basic psychological needs that everybody has. So as a communicator, and I believe most of the communication we have, whether it's trying to get your teenager to do their chores or trying to get somebody on your team to deliver on a project or trying to get a client to purchase something from you. Absolutely. Most of the communication we have, there's an underlying influence to it. Yes. You are trying to convince somebody to do something, hopefully for their own reasons. That's the carrot aspect of it. Sometimes you're trying to convince somebody to do something for your reasons, and there comes the stick. Like if you don't do this, then you lose that. That's two teenagers, right? But the more you're able to be aware of what your audience's emotional need is in that moment, or what are they most focused on? Are they most focused on how this conversation is impacting them as an individual? If so, give them some certainty, give them some significance, let them know this conversation is going to go this way. We're having this talk right now because I want to hear how you manage this relationship. I'd love your insights on managing this business partner. You did such a great job at it in our last conversation, as opposed to just coming in and saying, hey, we need to talk. You start a conversation with, hey, we need to talk. Uncertainty is through the roof. Everybody's automatically in their head of like, what did I do wrong? Am I getting fired? Am I in trouble?
Yes.
But being able to address those unconscious needs first, if you're talking to somebody who has a high need for connection, you go in and you start that conversation and you ask them how their weekend was. You ask about their recent anniversary dinner before you jump into, and by the way, here's something I need from you. Because if you just go in and go, here's what I need from you, that person who really craves connection, they're thinking, but you don't know who I am. You haven't,
right.
You're almost going in assuming a level of rapport that person needs reinforced over and over again to have that connection. So if you're able to, this is the art of influence, is being able to say, okay, in delivering this message, my audience, and it's harder when you have a mixed audience. If you're delivering a message to a mixed group of people, you have to hit all of those emotional needs in that one message.
Oh, yeah.
You have to be able to provide that certainty and that significance and that connection and the mission and the strategy and the outcomes and the goals. You have to be able to hit all of that in your messaging. So this is a piece that, in the third step of the Lifeline Leader program, in that confidence system, a lot of this comes into communication and influence. And we'll really dig in on how can you have these conversations? If you're going to have a hard one-on-one with somebody on your team and providing them feedback, how do you go in a way that they actually want to do the steps to become better, as opposed to just getting defensive and saying, no, you're wrong, or you don't know what I already tried? How do you even start that conversation in a way that they can hear your message without going into all of the unconscious chatter that their emotional and psychological needs are bringing to the surface for them?
Absolutely. You talked about building rapport.
Yes.
Building rapport. I'm a proponent of building rapport with other individuals, but it's so funny, as a society, we know more about other people than we know about ourselves. Sometimes it doesn't hurt. Who cares what anybody thinks? When I say this part, if you're in the car by yourself, I know for me, I talk to myself. Hey, how
Oh,
you
I
doing? Hey,
sing.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
If I'm in the car, I'm singing.
What you going to get accomplished today? Everything.
Nice.
I'm doing
That's
all of
great
that.
self-talk, by the way. Great self-talk there.
But it's the passion, reigniting our passion. I would love, and we're almost at the end of our conversation, but I would love if you can share a success story of a client. If you can, I know you may not be able to, but if you can share a success story of a client where you help guide them and coach them and help them overcome challenge to reignite that passion, to become that person they knew they could become.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do have a client, a very high ranking military official, actually, who came to me at a point of, at a stage of his career of saying, okay, I'm on the path to this highest level of leadership. And honestly, I'm burned out. Like I'm in the system. The system does not change easily. It's the military.
Yeah.
You know, what impact can one person have? And at the same time, feeling a lot of responsibility for all the people below him that he did lead. Right. And we spent, we actually ended up working together for over 3 years, in part because, you know, as making these decisions about the next step in his career, we finally got to the point of saying, okay, yes, this is your vision. This is the impact you want to have. Is this still the employment? Is this still the body that lets you have the impact you want to have? And I mean, he was on the fence for a while. He went back and forth, and it's kind of interesting because in the military, there's different levels of, you know, moving up between roles. It's not like a Fortune 500 job where you go apply for a promotion and you either get it or you don't. Like the military is its own beast. So he had some time to make the decision of whether he was on the right path or to get off the path. And if he was getting off the path, did that mean getting out of the military completely? He ultimately decided to not stay on the original path. He took a sidestep where he is still in the military, but it's a new path for him. And seeing the opportunity, you know, he told me when he had the conversation with his leaders and said, I want to do important things in interesting places with amazing people. That's ultimately what he came down. And he's like, if you can find a way that I can do this. And they were like, hey, by the way, we just created this role. We think you're a perfect fit for it. And it's a role that he didn't even know existed. But because he was able to really align with the impact he wanted to make, he was able to go to them and say, this is the impact I want to have. You know, I've spent 25, almost 30 years giving my life and my service to this organization. This is the impact I want to have. Can you help me do it? If not, that's okay. Like, we'll part ways. And they said, you know, we don't want to lose you. We've created this thing here for you. Here it is. And it was a perfect fit. And now he's looking at that role going, I get to go create something new that never existed, having the impact he wants to have. And that passion is back for him. So seeing that and knowing that I got to be this part of coming back to what really matters and how does that show up in your work and how do you stay aligned with these values? And that's where the alignment piece, like I said, we always start with the alignment piece, but then we keep coming back to it. And what are the boundaries you need to reinforce that? And what does your confidence need to be? Your communication need to be to come back and say, this is what matters most to me. If I can have this impact in this role, then I'm willing to sacrifice whatever else it might mean. I mean, in the military, you're sacrificing a lot with your family, right? You're gone for a long time.
Right.
You're missing certain things. And he was able to say, knowing how much, you know, his daughter's young, you know, his kids are young. So being able to say, if I'm missing these opportunities with my family, I have to have this impact. If you can't give it to me, then that's okay. And if you can, they were able to make it happen. So that was a fun process to watch.
I would imagine. And how long did that take for that all that to transpire?
About 3 years. And part of that was because just the path he was on, he had a few years when we started working together before he had to make the final, am I going down this path or not decision. So we spent a lot of those years getting him clear, looking at what opportunities outside of the military might look like, knowing he had several years before he had to, I guess, fish or cut bait, right?
Okay. Thanks for sharing that. So you're on the ChampionNation podcast. And so, you know, there are so many metaphors to highlight what a champion means to individuals in society. But we want to hear from you, the listeners and the viewers. Yeah. We want to hear from you. What does it mean to be a champion, in your opinion?
Yeah. Okay. In my opinion, I would say, I mean, it's easy to think, oh, a champion's a winner. Okay, great. What's a winner? In my mind, if you are winning at life, if you are a champion, then you are living the life that you want to live. That doesn't mean everyone go out and be a narcissist and only worry about yourself, but it means making sure that the decisions you are making, the way you're showing up, are aligned with the way that you want to live so that you can have the impact you want to have. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to go out and get the highest paying job, or that everybody has to go out and have the high status items. I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, you know that you're a champion, you know you're a winner when you make this much money, you have that much in the bank, you have these investments, you have the private jet, you're like, no, okay, that's what your life looks like.
Right.
I know, plenty of people that are like, no, my life is, I can go hide out in the woods and no one's going to contact me for 3 weeks because I'm communing with nature, I'm having this experience. And that's just it. Being a champion doesn't look the same for everybody.
Right.
And we have to stop expecting everybody to agree with what our standards tell us. This is what winning looks like. So for me, the biggest champions are the ones who are able to design a life, a career, an experience on this earthly plane that is aligned with what they truly want. And that they're willing to do the work to ask themselves along the way, am I still on the right path? Is this still my dream? Is this still my goal? And if it's not, what shift do I need to make? Does it need to be a big shift or a small shift? Can, these little baby steps can take us on a slightly different path, get us to a totally different outcome.
I love it. I love it. If you're living the life that you want to live, and then you're winning, you're a champion. I like that.
Exactly.
Hey, Dr. Parker, where could our viewers and listeners connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. I bet if you put in Benah, Benah, I will likely be one of the first people to come up because I'm the only one I've ever met. So people can follow me on LinkedIn and on YouTube as well.
Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate this conversation. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Hey, ChampionNation, in the words of Dr. Parker, if you are living the life that you want to live, not what your parents want you to live, or your partner wants you to live, or your job or society wants you to live, if you're living the life that you want to live, then you are winning. In fact, you're not just winning, you're a champion. Hey, ChampionNation, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share, and have a champion week. Take care.